Hello and welcome to my class. I'm Grolin Annesley from ThinkMo Education. I'm currently a Cisco Technological lecturer. If you like my video, welcome to my study group. Or contact my teaching assistant. WhatsApp account is +6 583444290. Today's topic is IP address. In the last lesson we talked about the basic concepts of the overall network and a 7-layer reference model, including 2 key parameters in the data link layer, source MAC and destination MAC. We revolve around one of the most core parameters in the network layer today. To explain to you IP address. That before we start class, let's review the main functions responsible for the network layer mentioned in the previous lesson. We mentioned the physical layer earlier. For example, a transmission medium used to connect physical devices. Finally, the connection of the device can be formed and pass the signal inside. Well, it's better at the physical layer. Data link layer. Actually both. More are responsible for the content on a link, or responsible for a function on a link. Then after reaching our network layer, we're going to open up our eyes. The network layer defines appearing in our network worldwide. Every device, every node. Its location is a global concept. The data link layer is relatively. Its pattern or scope will be smaller. That is IP address. It's like we send courier. The 2 most important parameters. That is your sender, recipient, and your address. No matter how many transfers there are, then the IP address will not be changed. We are in the 3rd floor. How to accurately find such an IP address, and how to achieve correct forwarding. This is in our network layer. The functions and responsibilities that the IP address is to provide. So our core today. It's all about IP addresses. It actually has quite a lot of content. We're going to talk about the basic components of an IP address, including its classification, and some special IP addresses. There are also 2 techniques used for IP addresses. A variable length subnet mask. One called VLSM. That is SuperNet. There is a lot of content in this class, so I hope you will listen carefully. We are now officially starting classes. I believe everyone should have heard the term IP address before. We are network engineers. You must be familiar with IP addresses. First of all, let's be clear. IP address plays a role in global positioning. This is the core of its role. Then the IP address will work in a wider range. As long as you need the network layer for data forwarding, all need an IP address. This is where it works. So for the MAC address we talked about in the last lesson, relatively speaking, its scope is smaller. It works on a link. A link refers to a logical link. For example, we have several devices connected to the same switch, without any configuration on the default switch, actually equivalent to our devices. Both work on a logical link. That is MAC address. It has a smaller scope. IP addresses provide global location. This is the difference between MAC address and IP address. I just draw a picture for you. Let's take a look together. Scope of their role in the network. For example, now this is a switch. I take what I just said, draw it for everyone. Here are the 3 PCs below. When the company is online, export to a router. So we first put these devices connected to each other. Then the working range of MAC address. Actually in this area, all devices are connected to this one switch. We call this way logical interconnection. The logical interconnection is not a real physical direct connection. There is a difference between them. For example, if you look at the difference between the two devices, PC1, PC2, data can be transferred between them. This data will be sent to the switch first. Then send it to PC2. PC1 and PC2 are logically directly connected. But they are not directly connected physically. What we call a direct connection in the physical state. Through a line. Connect PC1 and PC2 together. If their data is transmitted over such a physical link, we call it physical interconnection. But not now. Although they are not interconnected by a real wire, and made a transfer through the intermediate switch. But it's still a direct link. We call this the logical interconnection. Then the range of MAC address work has a range here. In fact, in such an area, for example, the current operator going to visit some services on the public internet in the future. This is the service provided by the operator on the public network. I also connected the router from the company's outlet. Also connected to a server on the public network. Let's say this is a Google server. Then if I pass the MAC address, want to access Google from this device, it's out of the question. Because the scope of MAC address work ends here. In the future, we will slowly start to learn the configuration. Everyone from MAC and IP will have a deeper understanding. But in the early stage, everyone must have a basic impression. The switch can use multiple network ports on the body. Connect multiple devices to one. This state is called logical interconnection. Then you need to locate a certain address on such a link. What we need to look at is a certain device. Depends on the IP address. Then if an interface of the router connected another link, such as operator, the address where we are going to work is the IP address. The MAC address no longer has the corresponding function. There is no way to cross our logical link and transmit the corresponding information. So the MAC address works in our layer 2 environment. Once the future has to cross the second floor, we have to jump out of this logical link. Can't use MAC address. Now we're going to use the IP address. That is, we have a new parameter. IP address. When data is forwarded, we are forwarding by querying IP from one device to another. For example, a return package from Google. Back on this device. The device will query the local routing table, also called IP address forwarding table. Then the data will be forwarded. After that is the MAC address and its working range. So, the two addresses are actually used in combination. It can be easily understood as MAC is to locate the local address. IP addresses, global addresses. That's in our overall data communication. IP addresses never change. The MAC address varies with the link. It will change. This is the difference between them. Here are some recaps of what came before. So let's take a look now. Other than IP address, what else we'll see today? First, there is an IPv4 address here. When I told you about the IP header before, I should have mentioned there are two versions of the entire IP protocol. One is version 4. One is version 6. We will only be exposed to version 4 during the NA phase. It is also the most used version in the corporate network now. It's also the big version we're using now. Because of the migration to